Most Americans have no idea what's about to happen. 63% of all Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Even those who are making over $100,000, half of them live paycheck to paycheck. Almost 60% of Americans don't have an extra $1,000 in emergency bill. And prices are about to double or even triple in some cases. What do you think is going to happen to most Americans? If you're making over $300,000, then you are safe. But if you're making less than that, then you're about to get much poorer. The United States is perfectly positioned to win this trade war against China. But nobody said that it's not going to be painful. Prices in some cases can even double or triple. And it's not just simply going to cause a recession like in 2008. But this crisis could be as big as the crisis of the 1929. This could be the greatest crisis of the 21st century in the United States. So here in this video, let's find out how bad this crisis could possibly be and how you can perfectly take advantage out of it and how you should prepare for it. If you're ready, give this video a thumbs up and let's get right into it. Consumerism is the backbone of the US economy. The only way that an economy would grow is when people spend money. Every dollar that you spend is someone's income. So if you go to a grocery store and you spend a single dollar, then the owner of that grocery store will take that dollar and will go and fix his car. The mechanic will take that dollar and is going to spend it on something else. And over time, that dollar keeps circulating within the entire economy, and that leads to an economic growth. That leads the GDP to growth. So the backbone of the economy is to trade. The more we trade, the more we buy, the more we sell, the faster the economy is going to grow. If tomorrow everybody stops buying and selling stuff, if trade stops tomorrow, you have to understand that it is going to have a direct negative implication on the entire economy. And the trade between China and the United States is not just a couple of billions of dollars. It is literally hundreds of billions of dollars annually. And getting so much trade out of the economy and imposing tariffs of 145% literally means that the trade between these two countries is officially over. Less money will be spent in the United States, which will lead to economic stagnation, which will lead to an economic crisis. And manufacturing is not going back to the United States. And that is something that you have to simply understand. Because companies have already spent hundreds of billions of dollars building the infrastructure over the last 30 years. And no matter how good you are at manufacturing things, no matter how big you are, you cannot simply shift manufacturing overnight. Let me give you an example. Apple started moving manufacturing from China into India back in 2017. And right now in 2025, 1 in 7 iPhones are being manufactured in India. And that is 7 to 8 years of real work of actually moving manufacturing. And they moved manufacturing together with a Chinese company called Foxconn that actually builds the iPhones in China. So with the help of Chinese, they could actually move away so much manufacturing from China into India. If you want to move it back to the United States, then it's gonna take at least 7 years, if not longer than that. Even if we assume hypothetically that we're going to bring it back to the United States, that means that over the next 5 to 7 years, as we're building those plants, the price of iPhones are going to at least double. Because when you're bringing an iPhone, let's just assume hypothetically that each iPhone that comes into the United States comes at the price of $700 each, because the basic iPhone costs around $1,000. Let's be a bit more generous. Let's say that it's $500 a piece. With 150% in tariffs, each iPhone is going to cost around $1,300 just to get them into the United States, and Apple has to make a profit on it, which means that the basic iPhone, the price of it is going to go to at least $1,500 or $1,700 or probably even $2,000, because we don't know for a fact how far these tariffs are going to go. Will people buy more iPhones or they will buy less iPhones because the price have increased? Obviously, people will buy less iPhones. And as I told you earlier, spending money is the basic principle of economic growth. So less people spend money, less economic growth, which means a recession, and that recession could even turn into a depression if spending is going to go much lower than that. Another thing that you have to understand is that this iPhone is not a new technology. It has been around for 15 years or probably longer than that. And it has a life cycle, which means that 10 or 15 years from now, iPhones might not actually be around anymore. Or maybe in 5 to 10 years, there is going to be a technology that is going to replace iPhone, which means that if Apple is going to spend $200 billion or $300 billion to build those plants in the United States, Apple might not actually never be able to make those money back, because they will have to spend another few $100 billion building plants for the new product that they will come that will replace iPhone, for example. Any product has a life cycle, and when you're building factories and plants, you're keeping in mind that I'm going to spend, yes, maybe $50 billion or $100 billion, but because I'm going to sell this product over the course of the next 20 years, for example, I'm going to divide that $100 billion over the course of 20 years and on each single piece of the product that I'm selling, and that's why I'm building this huge plant that costs so much money. But if I know for a fact that I will never be able to make this money back, will I actually spend so much money building those plants? Well, absolutely not. It does not make any sense. And if you think that Apple should do that, then why don't you go and build those factories if you're not going to turn a profit? You're not going to do that. In fact, you might be even complaining that you're not being paid enough. So why do you think that Apple should spend so much money investing in something that they will never make their money back? And you have to understand that Apple is a privately owned company. They're accountable to their shareholders. And if Apple is not going to stay profitable, then shareholders are going to sell their stocks and the company is going to go bankrupt over time. And if you say that, oh, I'm not using an iPhone, I'm fine. It's not just about the iPhones. It's about everything. Your fridge probably comes from China. Your TV probably comes from China. And even if you're an Android user, let's say that you have a Samsung, do you think Samsungs are being manufactured in the US? Well, absolutely not. Some of them are actually being built in China, others in Vietnam. So when tariffs are increased so much, there is certainly going to be less in spending because prices all across the globe are going to rise. Thirdly, iPhones aren't just simply being sold in the United States. They're being sold all over the globe. And Apple will continue manufacturing iPhones in China because there are no 150% tariffs between China and the European Union. So they can simply keep making those iPhones for the people who live in the EU where they don't have to pay so much tariffs. They will continue making iPhones in China because China is one of the largest markets in the world, and they continue selling their iPhones in China and all across the globe. So the only expensive iPhones are going to be in the United States, while the rest of the world are going to enjoy cheap iPhones and cheap Samsungs, cheap TVs, cheap everything other than the United States, which means that there is less spending in the United States, which means that there is an economic crisis looming around the corner. The second biggest problem is that rebuilding supply chains is going to take years, if not decades. Over the last 30 years, companies have spent hundreds of billions of dollars, probably trillions of dollars, setting up the entire infrastructure all across the globe. So part of it is manufactured in China, for example, let's say it's a car. Another part of it is manufactured in Australia, then the entire Southeast Asia, then you have Canada, Mexico, and the rest of the world. And even though that the car, for example, is assembled in the United States, it doesn't mean that everything is being built in the United States. And when you're destroying that entire supply chain where you spend trillions of dollars to build, do you think you can actually rebuild it overnight? And if companies are going to rebuild it and the US is going to force the US companies to rebuild it, they cannot do it for free. They have to spend so much money. And again, ask yourself a question. How do you think the companies are going to recoup the cost that they're going to spend on doing that? They will pass down that cost to consumers, which means that prices are going to rise. There is nothing in the world right now is being entirely manufactured in one single country. It's not China, it's not India, it's not Southeast Asia, it's not Canada or Mexico. And you cannot possibly do that. And with a 150% tariff, it makes no sense. Then you have to somehow manufacture it locally. If there is an American manufacturer that produces a specific smartphone or a part for a car and it's not cost effective, they're not worried about bringing their costs down or becoming more efficient because they're being protected by the government with those huge tariffs of 150%, which makes the entire industry very inefficient. But the biggest problem is that can actually change the entire consumer behavior. What makes the US such a powerful economy is because people spend money in the United States. People are not afraid. And even if you are not having that money, you can literally just use a credit card and keep buying stuff. And that spending keeps driving the economy forward. And that's why the US economy is the world's most powerful economy, because people keep spending money. But if you see prices are rising and people are living paycheck to paycheck, and suddenly they realize that every single year prices are rising because of these tariffs, what kind of a mentality it is going to create within the entire United States? It will prevent people from spending. You will start thinking, why should I spend money right now when prices are going to rise? I better should actually at least save some money, because I don't know if I'm going to make money tomorrow. Because of these tariffs, there's less economic activity, there is less jobs, and there is less money to be made in the economy, which means that people will start spending less and less. Even if they wanted to spend, they cannot spend as much as they used to in the past, which means that the economy is going to slide into a recession over time, and people will start saving more and more money. And that will create deflationary environment within the entire economy. It might not happen within the next couple of months, but it can certainly happen within the next couple of years. Less spending will obviously lead to less profits. If you have a business and you're selling bread, for example, and now the price of bread have increased, less people buy your bread, which means that there is less revenue in your company tomorrow, which means that there is less profit. And now take this very simple concept and apply it to the entire economy, and suddenly you will figure out that Amazon will make less money, Apple will make less money, which is certainly going to lead to stocks to actually growing much slower than they are right now. But if that less spending is going to become instant because tomorrow tariffs have been risen so much, then the stock market can crash even further. The sequence is very simple. High tariffs in order to protect the jobs in the United States. That's how it starts all the time. Then other countries retaliate with the exact same thing. Other countries are not simply going to watch the United States raising the tariffs on them. They will retaliate with the exact same thing. You've seen that with China. The US raises the tariffs, then Trump raises the tariffs. The US raises the tariffs on the European Union, then the European Union raises the tariffs on the United States, and so on and so forth. Now, everybody having so much high tariffs, then trade becomes unprofitable for any business, and nobody is going to do that kind of a trade between the two countries, which means that there is less economic activity in every single country, and that shrinks the economy. But right now, what we are seeing is happening is that the United States is the only country that is raising the tariffs on everybody. We haven't heard about the trade war between the European Union and China, or between China and India and the rest of the world. So that leads to less trade, and less trade obviously leads to less economic growth, and that leads, of course, to a recession. And if that recession actually continues, then it turns into something that we call a depression, like it happened back in 1929. In fact, what made the depression of 1929 so bad wasn't just the crisis. Like, it started in 1929, and then the United States wanted to protect its industries. That's why the United States in 1930 raised the tariffs in order to protect these vital industries. Now, there was less trade in the United States, and that economic crisis worsened over time. And instead of it taking a year or two like it usually happens with economic crises, the Great Depression lasted 10 years. If the United States did not have all those tariffs back in 1930, the US exports decreased by about 60% within the next couple of years of the United States imposing so much high tariffs back in 1930. If the US did not do that, then probably the Great Depression wouldn't last 10 years. In fact, what got the US out of the Great Depression was World War II, where the United States yet again started trading with the world, and it got rid of all these tariffs. So if these tariffs are going to last for the next couple of years as Trump is in office, they can certainly cause an economic recession and probably even a depression, where prices are going to keep rising while GDP is going to stay the same. That's what we call a stagflation. And that stagflation can easily turn into a depression. But what I believe for a fact is that Trump is doing all of that in order to sign a better deal with other countries. I mean, he said that very clearly. So even though that we're going to go through this turmoil and everybody is going to suffer for a very short period of time, including the stock market, when the deals are going to be signed, then the stock market is going to rally dramatically. And if you perfectly position yourself, if you know which stocks to buy, which stocks to sell, then you can obviously profit from it. This is probably one of the unique opportunities out there, because we know for a fact that the United States does not want to isolate itself. We know that for a fact. It's not some kind of a speculation. I know that it doesn't seem to a lot of people right now like that, but we know for a fact that Trump wants to sign a deal. The reason he's causing so much chaos is because he wants, in the middle of this chaos, he wants to destroy the system and instantly sign a deal that is much more favorable to the United States. Yes, maybe not all manufacturing will come back to the United States, but that deal will be in such a way that it's going to be much more favorable to the US companies, which will lead a lot of these stocks to grow dramatically. So make sure that you take advantage out of it. And if you want to know which stocks I'm buying, which stocks I'm selling, then you can check the first link in the description. That's it for today. Thanks guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.